Once upon a time, there was a young boy from Kansas. A couple of things worth knowing about this boy. First, he always liked to win. And second, he came from a pretty poor family. Well, one Halloween, this boy was at school, and because it was Halloween day, every student was wearing a Halloween costume. This boy was so poor that his family couldn't really afford a costume that year, so he literally just took a sheet off his bed, wrapped it around his body, and went to school as a ghost. The problem was, the sheet was more beige than white, and it also had a bit of a floral pattern on it, so it wasn't very ghostly. Add to that, it was raggedy. There were holes in it, not just holes for the eyes. There were other holes that weren't supposed to be there. So all in all, it was a very poor attempt at a poor man's Halloween costume. Anyway, at recess, some other boys noticed the raggedy brown ghost and predictably began making fun of him. They made fun of the boy for having a horrible costume, and frankly, it was horrible. They made fun of the holes in the sheet. They were making fun of him for being poor. Now, there was nothing the boy could really do in response to remove the sting of these insults. He could have ignored the taunts, but that wouldn't change the fact that he looked fairly stupid and raggedy and poor. He knew it. He could have attacked the boys, physically or verbally. But again, that wouldn't change the fact that he was raggedy and poor and ashamed of it. So instead of these things, the boy who liked to win, he stopped, and he looked directly into the eyes of his tormentors. He dug his fingers into the raggedy holes of his brown ghost costume, and he ripped the holes even wider, tearing half the costume to shreds. The bullies could only look on in confusion. And so the boy who liked to win won. Halloween is almost upon us. It is perhaps my favorite time of year. And I am not the only one. Americans spend more money on Halloween than any other holiday besides Christmas. This year, it is estimated that Americans will spend $11.3 billion, with a B, on Halloween. And y'all may have noticed yourselves that Halloween as an industry has been growing steadily for the past several years, and the growth is not coming from children. Last year, Americans spent $1 billion on costumes for children. But for adult costumes, we spent $1.2 billion. That's $200 million more for adult costumes than kid costumes. Adults are now celebrating Halloween more than children. So, if it's not for the trick-or-treating or the candy, then what exactly is driving the popularity of Halloween, especially for adults? One theory suggests that human beings, especially adults, like putting on masks. We enjoy stepping out of our real identity, becoming anonymous, and/or becoming something or someone else. Halloween, of course, is a perfect opportunity for just that. Now, this theory definitely makes some intuitive sense, but the need or desire to wear a mask can easily be satisfied through other outlets throughout the year, masquerade parties or cosplay at comic and sci-fi conventions. So I think that Halloween is more than just costumes and masks. Another theory suggests that human beings love to be scared. Why? When we become scared, our brain releases dopamine, which then creates a natural high. So as a society, as we become more adept at scaring ourselves, we're basically getting better at releasing dopamine. And it's driving us like drug addicts to keep doing it better and better, more and more. Also, not a bad theory. But I don't think this theory properly differentiates between being truly scared and merely being startled. It seems to me that dopamine addiction theory is actually more linked to being startled. Being startled gives you that immediate adrenaline rush. You jump, your heart starts beating against your chest like a phone book in a dryer. That's what triggers the dopamine. But when someone startles you by jumping out from behind a curtain, shouting boo, they haven't really scared you. They haven't filled your heart with terror. That's what Halloween uniquely brings to the table. Halloween is a celebration of horror. It is a reflection of humanity's inherent fear and fascination with the macabre. Halloween has roots in the ancient Gaelic celebration of Samhain. Ancient Celts believed in thin places and thin times, places and times where the veil separating this world from the supernatural world were especially thin, perhaps even lifted. Samhain was recognized as just such a time. Interestingly, however, Halloween is generally not dominated by reflections of bright and beautiful supernatural creatures, though we do occasionally see kids and adults dressed up as angels and fairies. We had a few this morning. The norm is actually to see demons and devils. Halloween more often celebrates the dark and fearsome aspects of the supernatural. Halloween is a holiday filled with ghosts and goblins, vampires and zombies, haunted houses and poltergeists. And I would suggest, not coincidentally, Halloween has also become a time when we as a culture have decided that it's okay to lift the veil that separates normal accepted behavior from the dark but instinctive taboos that we are usually too afraid to release or exhibit. During Halloween, for example, we encourage people to deceive us. We playfully create costumes and watch horror movies that glorify all manner of blood and violence that we would never condone in real life. During Halloween, we allow each other to be much freer and public with our own sexuality, especially women. If you don't believe me, go walking down the women's costume aisle of a Halloween shop. You'll see what I mean. So, if you're working on a crossword puzzle and you come across this clue, a 3-letter word ending with the letter N that involves deceit, mischief, violence, and sex, 364 days a year, the answer would be sin. But on Halloween, the answer is fun. But even if we understand Halloween as a release valve for humanity's dark and hidden needs and desires, we're still in the realm of fear. We're dabbling with actions, attitudes, and thoughts that we are too afraid to deal with in real life, which returns us again to the idea that Halloween is a celebration of all kinds of fear, but especially 2 kinds of fear. So for a moment, I'm going to take off the minister's hat, or maybe the minister's horns. I'll put on my pop psychologist hat. I'm not Reverend Phil, I'm Dr. Phil now. Seems to me that since time immemorial, humanity has suffered from 2 great fears, 2 great anxieties: fear of the unknown and the fear of death. Halloween has become a time when we may safely confront, explore, question, and mock these dual fears. The great monsters of Halloween embody both the supernatural, that is, those things we cannot know or understand in our natural world, and also a perversion of death. Consider vampires. They're mysterious, they're supernatural. The laws of physics do not apply to them. They fly, they can transform into other things, they can control your mind. They don't live on food like us, they live on blood. And they also represent a perversion or a mockery of death. They're immortal, forever undead. Zombies, as Thomas talked about, also mysterious, almost otherworldly beings, even though they are human. Often they have super strength, they are supernaturally animated, they move and act even though the spark of life is missing from their bodies. And as such, they too represent a perversion and a mockery of death, a form of life that defies all death. Ghosts, again, they defy the natural laws. They fly, they walk through walls, they appear and disappear in the blink of an eye. They are what remains after the body dies, yet another form of mocking death to suggest that death is not really the end. Halloween is our time to mock, revel in, celebrate, and exaggerate the gruesome, macabre aspects of death. It is a time when we revel in the dark aspects of all that we cannot understand in this physical and natural world. But why do we do it? Several lifetimes ago, I was a case manager. I worked with severely emotionally disturbed children and their families, and nearly all of the children on my caseload were victims of trauma. Trauma is an interesting concept. The best definition I ever heard came from my supervisor back in Kansas when I was a case manager. He explained to me that at the heart of all trauma is a loss of freedom, a loss of control. Acute trauma occurs when something happens at a particular place or time that strips your control or sense of freedom. For example, you're in an alley and someone mugs you at gunpoint. Your freedom to live or die has been taken from you. You no longer have the freedom to even choose if your life will continue. Chronic trauma also stems from a loss of freedom and control, but it happens over a longer time. For example, a child who comes from an impoverished household where food is scarce. Morning, noon, and night, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that child does not know whether he will eat. He has no choice, no control over it. The completely normal response to any kind of trauma is to attempt to regain your sense of control, the control that has been stripped from you. So with that working definition of trauma, I would suggest that death is the greatest cause of trauma for all of us, and fear of the unknown is a close second. Death inexorably comes for each and every one of us. It cannot be stopped. We have no choice in the matter. Every one of us seated here today has struggled with the fear and anxiety related to contemplating our very own demise. Some of us may have found a tenuous peace, others still struggle. Several of us are struggling this week in particular. As for the unknown, it's out there. We don't know its nature or what it holds for us. We don't know whether the supernatural even exists at all. If it does, we don't know whether it's benevolent, malevolent, both or neither. And that lack of knowledge creates a form of chronic anxiety and chronic trauma for many of us. Halloween, then, represents the very human attempt to gain some measure of control over these things that we have absolutely no control over whatsoever. How do we do it? By embracing and exaggerating and celebrating that which we cannot overcome, the unbeatable foe. And in so doing, we steal victory from it, for we have stolen its ability to make us afraid. Like the poor boy from Kansas, who ripped his Halloween costume and celebrated and exaggerated his poverty in front of his bullies, he could not change his poverty, but he stole the sting of their insults. We rarely think of it this way, but Halloween represents the indefatigable courage, resilience, and nobility of the human spirit. At Halloween, we collectively defy our fear by embracing it. In so doing, we make the bold declaration that we refuse to die or live as cowards. In conceptualizing Halloween as a defiant celebration in the face of our fear of death and the unknown, I am reminded of this sonnet by Claude McKay. He was a Jamaican-American poet of the Harlem Renaissance, and this poem is entitled, "If We Must Die." If we must die, let it not be like hogs hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us die nobly, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. So, this Friday, celebrate. Defy fear. Fight back. Blessed be.